Hey everybody, Sarah with the Hobby Lobby Creative Studio here with you. Today I'm going to show you a few basics of crochet. Now's your chance to learn how to do this needle art that's more popular than ever, so don't go away. Well, I have a great tutorial for you today that will show you everything from what you need to have to be able to crochet in the first place, all the way through to some different stitches that you can try. And when we're done, you'll be ready to start practicing on an easy project of your own. So let's get started. So let's start with your supplies. The most basic things you need to be able to crochet are yarn, a crochet hook, and a pair of scissors. As a beginner, you'll want to choose a yarn that has a medium to slightly bulky weight. This means that it's not going to be too thin and hard to see, but it's not going to be too bulky and hard to handle either. So the fact that it's a medium to slightly bulky weight is indicated right here by this number on this little yarn icon on the yarn's label. So look for a number 4 or 5. Now you also want to choose a yarn that has a smooth texture and isn't too fancy or fuzzy because you'll be able to see what you're doing a lot more easily. Next, you'll need a crochet hook. Crochet hooks come in all different sizes and they're made from a few different materials. Aluminum hooks in particular are a great choice to use as a beginner. The size of the hook is determined by how thick or thin the hook is, and this is also what affects how large or small your individual stitches turn out to be. Now when you get into crochet patterns, the pattern will indicate what size hook that they recommend using for that particular project. But if you're just trying to learn how to crochet on your own, then a size K or even a size I will be great sizes to use for those medium to slightly bulky weight yarns. So how do we start? Well, first things first, we always start with a slip knot. This is how we get our yarn onto our hook. So to make a slip knot, take your yarn and put the end of the yarn in your left hand and take the yarn that's still attached to the yarn ball, which is called the working yarn, in your right hand. And what I do is I work around my two fingers, my pointer finger and my middle finger, and I wrap that working piece of yarn around both fingers, around the back till it gets to the front again, and around the back again. And now that I'm on the back side, I tuck that yarn into that loop and pull it out and up, just like that. And then tighten that loop, and there's our slip knot. So now what we do is insert the hook into that loop, pull on the working piece of yarn, and that will tighten the loop up next to our hook. So now what we can do is hold on to this little tail with our right hand so that we just keep it out of the way before we do our stitches. And now what we're going to do is the chain stitch. The chain stitch is actually the foundational row of stitches that we use to stitch the whole rest of our piece onto. So to do the chain stitch, we need to figure out the hold that we need to have on our hook. Now everybody has a little bit of a different hold. It just depends on what you feel most comfortable with. So you can just experiment and find out what way feels most comfortable to you to hold your hook. So how I like to hold it is the hook in my right hand, and then with my left hand, I put my thumb and my middle finger near the slip knot of the hook, and then I kind of scoop my pointer finger in and under the yarn like that, and then make sure I close that thumb and middle finger around there again. So here's my hold that I like to have. So you can try this and see if it works for you as well. So to begin chaining, what you're going to do is called a yarn over. And a yarn over is where you actually wrap the yarn around the back of the hook, the working yarn, the one that's still attached to the yarn ball. So you wrap the yarn around the back of the hook like this, catch it with the hook, and bring it down through that first stitch or the slip knot that you made. So there's one chain stitch. Now to do it again, you just repeat the same thing. Yarn over, catch it with the hook, and pull it down through the loop. Yarn over, and pull it down through the loop. So this is chaining. Now, the number of chains that you make will determine either the length or the width of your project depending on its orientation. So if you get lost and you're not sure how many chain stitches you've made, that's okay. They kind of make what looks like little V's, don't they? So what you can do is just go back and count how many V's that you've made, and that's how many chain stitches that you have. If you're working from a crochet pattern, the pattern will indicate how many chain stitches that you need for that particular project. Now, your chain stitches shouldn't be too tight because they'll be harder to stitch into that way, but they shouldn't be too loose looking either. They should just lie comfortably next to each other and have the same amount of tension as possible all the way across. So that's the chain stitch. The slip stitch is the smallest of all the different stitches with the least amount of height to it. Now, it's used to join your work together whenever you're working in the round. So some people think of it more as a technique more so than a stitch. So to practice the slip stitch, take your foundational row of chains that you just made, it doesn't matter how long it is, and your hook is still in one end, so take that hook and insert it into the very first chain stitch, and make sure you're going in from the front side with the V's facing up and that you're not going in from the back side here. So going into the front side in that first stitch, we now have 2 loops on our hook. So get a hold of your working piece of yarn here, and what you're going to do is yarn over and pull that working yarn through both loops. And now you have 1 loop on your hook, and that's the slip stitch. And no matter where you do this stitch or for what reason, it's always done this way. A single crochet stitch is one of the fastest crochet stitches that you can do. To start a single crochet after chaining, make sure that your V's are still facing right side up and that your work's not twisted. Take your hook and insert it into the second chain from the hook. So here's 1, 2. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull the yarn back through the stitch. You now have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again, and pull the yarn through both loops. And that's a single crochet. So to continue going over on your row, just insert the hook into the next stitch over or the next V. Yarn over, pull the yarn through the stitch. You now have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again, pull the yarn through both loops. And that's the single crochet. A double crochet stitch is a stitch that has a lot of height to it. So whenever you do this stitch, you're able to cover a larger area in a shorter amount of time. So to practice the double crochet stitch after chaining, with your hook still in the last loop here, you're going to yarn over first and insert your hook into the 4th chain from the hook. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So after you insert your hook into that 4th chain over, yarn over again, pull the yarn back through the stitch, and now we have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull the yarn through the first 2 loops. Now we have 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over again and pull the yarn through the last 2 loops so that we end up with 1 loop on our hook. Let's try that one more time. So we're going to yarn over first and then go into the next stitch over on our row. Yarn over again, pull the yarn back through the stitch so that we have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over, pull the yarn through the first 2 loops. We have 2 loops on our hook now. Now we're going to yarn over one last time and pull the yarn through those 2 loops, and we end up with 1 loop on our hook. And that's the double crochet stitch. A half double crochet stitch has more height to it than a single crochet stitch, but less height than a double crochet stitch. So this is a stitch that falls right in the middle of those two as far as height goes. So to do a half double crochet stitch after chaining, you're going to yarn over first and insert your hook into the 3rd chain from the hook. And I'll explain why we use that 3rd chain here in a minute. So then we're going to yarn over again, pull the yarn back through the stitch. We now have 3 loops on our hook. Now we're going to yarn over and pull the yarn through all 3 of those loops. Now we have 1 loop left on our hook, and that's 1 half double crochet. So let's do that one more time. We're going to yarn over first, go into the next chain over, or the next V over, yarn over, pull the yarn back through the stitch. We now have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull the yarn through all 3 loops. And that's half double crochet stitch. Let's talk about what it means to turn your work. Whenever you're crocheting something that is flat as opposed to something in the round, you crochet in a back and forth motion. So whenever you've reached the end of a row, you turn your work, and now you're ready to begin crocheting the next row up. Now before we can move on, we might have to chain 1 or more extra stitches here on the end. This is called a turning chain. So what it does is it provides the height that we need for whatever particular stitch that our project is made up of, so that when we go across on the next row, it's perfectly even and straight across and doesn't slant upwards. So for example, if we were to do a project that consists of a double crochet stitch and we didn't make that turning chain at the end of our row and we just went straight into a double crochet, it would look something like this. So you can see here, instead of it going up to a nice corner and going straight across, that it has this slanted look towards it. So what we need to do is make that turning chain so that it provides the height that we need for that double crochet stitch. So here's a rundown of the turning chains required for these kinds of stitches. So a single crochet stitch uses 1 turning chain, a half double crochet stitch uses 2, and a double crochet stitch uses 3 turning chains. So let's do a really quick example. So here's one swatch that I've already been crocheting on. So I'm at the end of my row here, and I need to make my turning chain that I'm doing for double crochet. So what I'm going to do is 1, 2, 3 turning chains. And now what's going to happen is when I start to go over on my row, this is going to stand up like this and provide the height that I need for my row to be totally straight across. So now, to continue, yarn over and insert the hook into the second stitch of your work because your turning chain counts as your first stitch of the row. And that's how we make a turning chain. Well, thanks for stopping by to try crochet with me today. I hope you learned a lot of great tips and information. Keep practicing those stitches and come see us again. Bye!